So tonight I have Lucas Martell, director, writer, producer, animator of Pigeon Impossible, short animation that I love and really enjoy. So Lucas, can you talk a little bit about like briefly what is the story idea, and also for people who haven't watched it yet, and also how did you come up with the story?
Well, the basic idea is that it is about a pigeon that gets trapped inside a James Bond style briefcase and runs amok in Washington D.C. The evolution of the story it took quite a while. There were a lot of different revisions. Originally, it was just like a guy versus a box, and then gradually that turned into a spy versus his high tech briefcase, and then the pigeon was a side character, and then we brought him into more of a role. So it was a very sort of like, it definitely wasn't conceived in its final form. That's the process of several iterations that have happened over the course of probably a good, it took a good 2 or 3 years before the story even kind of locked into where it finished up at.
Right. So the pigeon didn't show up in for the first 2 years or something like that.
I think the pigeon was in there after about the first year, but he was just kind of a side character.
Right. I see.
Yeah. And we weren't, especially because this was my first CG production, we jumped, I mean, it definitely wasn't the smart thing. I jumped straight into some of the character design and some of the animation and modeling before we really even had the story worked out. So the reason it took so long to get all that stuff is that, we'd like, we need to fix this little thing in the story. And we do that every week or 2 weeks. So it's not like we didn't know the process. So we just kind of started going through it and just sort of, feeling it out.
Right. So with the hindsight, and I guess for advice for new animators is really think clearly about the story first, so that you don't spend extra time on fixing things or
absolutely spend as and until you've kind of gone through it once, it's really difficult to do that and to know when the story is working correctly or even what sort of makes it good. So it does. Especially for people's first time out. That's definitely an ideal thing, but you're going to spend a lot of time going back and forth. That's just kind of the nature of learning. So
true, yeah. I guess you learn as you go too, right? If you wait till you have a perfect story and everything is perfect, then chances are you're never going to start it. Yeah, let's be
exactly, yeah. And even now that we have the story the whole movie finished, but if we were going to redo it, like the art direction would have been completely different. We wouldn't have had it take place in the same location. There would have been a lot of very, very big differences if we had gone back to just like the scene of the story and then built it out from there. It would have been a completely different movie.
So you started making the film since summer of 2004. When did you start the podcast and also the blog? Was it always an integral process of creating the film experience or generating attention or interest about the film?
I guess, are you talking about specifically just sort of like what the goal was when we started, sort of thing?
Yeah, when you start, or now at this today, you have blogs, you have podcasts, and those I think enhance the film experience, or let, in a sense, kind of people who are interested in animation can also learn from too, right? So I just wanted to find out,
the originally it was just supposed to be the film. But because this was such a learning process and I picked up so much throughout the course of doing it, that I realized that I wish that I had had some of these resources, whether it was more independent animators talking about the process they went through. And I mean, really, when we started, what was that, 2004? Yeah, it was summer 2004. There were hardly any other CG shorts being done because it was still just getting to the point where it was possible to do it on a home PC. So as far as like the whole independent CG animator, there just weren't really a whole lot of resources. So the podcast and the blog and all that sort of stuff really started because that's kind of like what I wish that I had had before I started, just so I could learn from other people's mistakes instead of having to kind of make them all yourself.
Right. So did you find that those doing the podcast, the blogs, and whatnot get actually it's not you, it's for someone else, give them a chance to meet you and to learn from you, to get in touch with you? Did you find that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I feel like I've learned just as much by doing the podcast and the blog and everything, because there's kind of I come from both my parents are teachers, and we've always kind of had this thing, like, if you want to learn how to do something, teach it, because
Yeah.
there were a lot of things that I learned by doing the production, but until you actually be like, okay, how do I present this to someone? So just by going through and trying to whittle down the idea of, okay, whether it's going to be like the multipass lighting, trying to boil that down to the core and establish some rules or some guidelines to pass on to other people, you don't have it clear sort of in your brain. So it actually does kind of take it and solidify the knowledge that you picked up. So I found that by doing that, it really did, it kind of solidified the stuff that I learned throughout the process of making the short.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, I do think that it does help a lot as far as like a lot of people, when they watch a CG short like this, they don't necessarily realize how much work went into it. And in fact, just from the comments that you'll see like on YouTube or whatever, you could tell a lot of people are asking, why did it take 5 years?
Uh-huh.
And so that's a good way to sort of show people just the sheer amount of work that goes into something like this, because until you've done it, it's really hard to just fathom just all the little tiny details that you would never imagine having to spend that much time on.
Yeah, it's like the magician open up the box a little bit and see what kind of mechanism goes through to make that the magic shot happen. I've got a chance to actually go through some of the YouTube things that you have done, explaining things, and all the individual cars, the trees, the stores, they are all different models, and then you can tune them and this and that. It's just, wow, it's amazing. So how many of those YouTube, I call them lessons that you have created, and how much time does it usually take you to plan and create one?
I'm sorry, the recording actually cut out there for a little bit. Were you asking how long to do each podcast?
Yeah, the podcast.
Oh,
yeah.
Each podcast probably takes about maybe 2 days, just because, I mean, the process of like figuring out, okay, what it's going to be on, whittling it down to a script of sorts. I never have an exact script, but I have some pretty solid guidelines, because when you're doing something that short, it has to, you really have to be very, very clear on what you're going in for doing. And then I always try to do those, some little thing, whether it's a joke or something, and that always takes a little while to shoot and edit and get all the screen captures and stuff. So yeah, generally about 2 days. And in fact, I've got at least 5 or 6 more than I'd like to do. I just haven't found the time to actually sit down, hammer out the episodes, and, actually get time to do them yet. So.
Yeah. It's time consuming, like you said, like 2 days each, and then you've got the films to promote. And I want to ask you about the promotion afterwards. So since you post the animation on YouTube on, if I remember right, if I read right, it's November 8th last year. There are 2.8 million, 2,800,000 views.
Yeah.
So what's like? How did that change from you? Like, I guess when you post it, like, it must trickle up a few hundreds or thousands. Like, how did that process go for you? Like,
well, as far as like the actual like release, there were a couple of people who posted on like. It got picked up by a couple, like Boing Boing, I think was the first one to grab it. And so once that was sort of the tipping point. And as soon as they picked that up, then it got to enough other people who spread it around. And yeah, so to be honest, like that's actually one of the reasons that I haven't done the podcasts, which seems kind of counterintuitive, but it's taken me so long just to, try to stay in touch with people who are sending emails and, people posting comments, and people have questions, and I try to answer all of them that I can. But that ends up taking a few hours each day just to go through all of that. So I'm so thankful for it, but it has taken a whole lot of the time that I would otherwise be probably doing the podcast.
Right.